Welcome everyone. My name is Jenna and I work with Center for Inspired Teaching. I am thrilled to be joining you this evening to talk about emotional self-awareness. I see familiar faces joining us and some new folks who are coming for the first time. Oh my goodness, Nathan from Australia, welcome. I can't even imagine, I'm just going to guess that it's many hours earlier or later than where we are. So thank you for joining us, whatever time of day it is for you. Um, for those who are joining us for the first time, Center for Inspired Teaching is a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C., although we get to work with people all around the globe, as we are tonight. And our work with teachers and schools focuses really on this kind of mission that we see in the bottom corner right here, that every child and teacher should love coming to school. What do we have to do to make that happen? That's the big question that we explore in our workshops. And we believe that we can create curiosity-filled, engagement-filled learning environments for teachers and for students when we focus on the things you see on our screen here. So classrooms that are centered around intellect, inquiry, imagination, and integrity. We call those our 4 I's. And those happen when we focus on these things on the outer circle: mutual respect, centering students as experts, creating learning experiences that are driven by purpose, persistence, and action, really focusing on spaces that build and create opportunities for students to create their own joy, and then using wide-ranging evidence of student learning to evaluate how well we're doing in creating an engaging learning environment. So tonight we're actually going to talk about kind of an unsung part of all of that, which is that we cannot really learn when we are not feeling well, needed, having our needs paid attention to and supported in our school environments. And so we're going to look a little bit at a variety of strategies that we've found effective at Inspired Teaching to help build emotional awareness in our students. But I also hope that you'll share some experiences from your varied school environments. So this year, all of our webinars that we've been doing at Inspired Teaching have focused on social emotional learning and connecting that to all of the other kinds of learning that take place in the classroom. And today we're moving into a focus on self-awareness. If this is a new graphic to you, this comes from CASEL, which is an organization that's done a brilliant job of codifying social emotional learning into these, what they call core competencies. And when we talk about self-awareness, it's being able to understand our own emotions, our thoughts and values, and how they influence behavior across contexts. And this includes being able to recognize one's strengths and limitations with a well-grounded sense of confidence and purpose. So that's kind of a big definition of self-awareness. Today, we're really going to look at the piece of that that has to do with understanding one's own emotions. And I don't know about everybody else who is joining us this evening, but I know for myself, this is actually a lifelong learning experience, paying attention to my own emotions, where they come from, how I deal with them, and being able to, that opening question that we had, being able to understand if I'm having an uncomfortable feeling, where it's coming from and what I want to do with it, is something that I feel like we continue to develop tools for throughout our lifetimes. But a lot of times when you're a child, these big emotions can come, and if you don't have all of the years that one gets as an adult to develop coping strategies or abilities to understand what our emotions are all about, they can be scary and they can lead to a lot of challenges in our learning experience. So one of the things that I really like to emphasize when I work with teachers is just the importance of taking the time in our instruction to give students space to notice their emotions, to be aware of them, to become cognizant of what's going on inside of their heads. And this can be difficult. I know everybody deals with time constraints in the classroom. This can also be difficult depending on the age of students that you're working with. I know Carliana has very young children. We might have some folks on the call tonight who are working with high school students, and the ability to really like sit with your thoughts is something that changes throughout our development. But I'm going to start with a couple of exercises that I've found useful in my work with teachers and students in schools that don't take very long. That can be something you can do at any point in your class period. They can be things that you can do as a warm up, or things that you can do if the class is just in a spot where you're like, we need a pause. We need to just ground ourselves for a moment. So I'm going to share two of them with you. These are kind of meditation exercises, but I wanted to start with them because I mean, the world is what it is right now, so all of us might benefit from a moment just to take a little breather. So we're going to start with this first one. Is called the Four Elements Grounding Exercise, and this is something that that therapists use a lot of times with their clients. It's something that I have definitely seen teachers use to great effect in a variety of different grade levels. You might need to change the language a little bit depending on the age of the children that you're working with, but it's based in thinking about the four elements of earth, air, water, and fire. So thinking about those are sort of concepts that I feel like even our youngest learners can understand. And what we do is we kind of go through each of those elements as we pause and take a breath and kind of get mindful. So I'll encourage us all just to take a deep breath right now. And then I'm just going to guide you through a reflection. And as you're going through this, just be with yourself and see what's happening in your body and in your mind. So first, take a few moments to land where you are. Start with grounding. Feel your feet on the floor if you're sitting. Feel the seat underneath you. Feel the contact your skin makes with whatever it happens to be touching. Just feel yourself rooted there for a moment. And if your eyes are closed, open them. And look around the room and notice three things. Just really focus on three things that you haven't looked at recently. If you're in your own room, sometimes it's surprising the things that you find. My eyes usually go to cobwebs, but find three things, just look at them and focus on them. Notice any sounds or smells or tastes that might be present. And now we're going to move to water. And this direction will sound a little strange, but I'll explain why in a moment, why we're doing it. So make saliva in your mouth and swallow a few times. And if you have trouble doing this and you have a glass of water or something next to you, you can take a drink. Whenever we enter fight or flight mode, when we're super wound up and anxious, the systems in our body that are not necessary for our immediate survival slow down. And that's why sometimes you can feel really like dry mouthed when you're very anxious. So, and that affects our digestive system. So creating saliva, just that act of pausing and doing that can calm your digestive system, and that can also activate your body's relaxation response. And now we're going to move to air. So with your eyes closed now, place your hands on your belly and imagine you have a balloon in there. And when you breathe in, you're going to feel that balloon swelling up and filling up with air. And when you breathe out, feel the air in that balloon deflate. Try breathing in to the count of 4. So in, 2, 3, 4, and try holding it for the count of 6. And then breathing out to the count of 8. So I'll try counting that for you. You might need to do this at your own pace, but just to see what that feels like. Breathing in for the count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Try another round of breath on your own. And now we'll move to the last element, fire, but I tend to think of, with this prompt, I think of warmth. So bring to mind a place or an activity where you feel safe, calm, and relaxed, or where you feel good about yourself. You feel at peace. Bring all your senses to this experience so you notice what you see, what you hear, what you taste and smell, what you feel. Just imagine yourself in that space where you feel so at peace, so relaxed. And notice what emotions you feel being in this safe, calm space. And now, if your eyes were closed, open them up and come back to the present moment. And if you'd be willing to share in the chat, or you can unmute, just tell me a little bit about what it felt like, when any of those prompts felt like for you. What did you notice? Oh, Nathan said, I like the swallowing one because it really takes your mind off everything except the action. Absolutely. When I remember the first time that I got that prompt, I was like, this is the weirdest thing ever. What are you asking me to do? But for each of those, what you've described there, Nathan, is exactly what makes this grounding exercise effective. Particularly when students are in a state, or any of us are in a state of high emotion, particularly distress. Each of these 4 prompts intentionally tries to bring us back into sort of focus and being centered and thinking about something other than whatever the large noise is that's going on in our brain. So the next one, I'll kind of walk through quickly just to give you an idea of it. And this is another, similar to the 4 elements grounding exercise. A sensory walk is something you can do in your classroom. It's also, I love to do it, taking students outside and having them walk in some sort of a slightly contained space. So, a blacktop, or if there's like a little garden or park or some kind of an outdoor gathering space around your school, this can be a great place. They don't need anywhere far to walk. They just need enough room to be able to walk around without bumping into each other, because that'll be a little bit distracting. But you can do this in the classroom too. I've done it in classrooms before. Particularly, if you can have students sort of walk around the outside of a classroom, or depending on how the room setup is, as long as you instruct them to, the goal is to walk and to listen to the prompts that you're giving, and not bump into each other or objects in the room. So a sensory walk, similar to the 4 elements grounding exercise, is something that helps us to use prompts to really focus our attention. So you have students begin by walking around the space, being mindful of themselves and others, and then you walk them through a series of prompts that have to do with each of their senses. So they start out walking, and your directions would be to say, notice how your body feels, become aware of your posture and the way that you're carrying yourself. And after each prompt, you let them keep going, probably for about, I do it depending on the time that I have available. It can be 30 seconds to a minute. Tune in, then the next one is using our eyes. Tune into any sights that come into your awareness. You're simply acknowledging what you see. And this, again, is a way to get really mindful and intentional. Like Nathan was talking about with the swallowing, taking your mind off everything except for the action. As a teacher walking students through this, you're trying to help them really focus their attention on something that will draw all of their attention. So just noticing what they see when they're walking around, any sights that they see. Then focusing on sound, notice any sounds that drift in. What sounds can you hear? My favorite additional direction here is to say, what can you hear beyond what you heard at first? And this is where, particularly in indoor spaces, we start hearing the hum of electric equipment, or particularly if a number of students are walking at the same time, they start to hear the difference in the sound between different shoes and how they sound on the ground. Then tune your attention to any smells. Notice how, when they're paying attention to their smell, encouraging them to notice how smells trigger thoughts and memories in our mind. What are those smells bringing up for you as you walk around and smell the space around you? And then Notice any physical sensations. If you're outside, sometimes this can be the feeling of the wind on their skin. If they're inside, sometimes you can draw their attention to things like how their shoes feel around their feet, how their clothing feels on their skin, on their body. Then I like to have students focus on the rhythm of their walking, just noticing their pace, noticing how their feet are landing on the floor. Do they put their heel first? Do they put their toe first? Just being aware of their walking. So you walk them through all of their senses in this way. Sometimes what I have actually done, you'll notice there wasn't really the sense of taste. I have done things before where I've given students like a mint or something and had them put a mint in their mouth at a particular point just to pay attention to that. And this, my background is as an English teacher. This actually can be an interesting activity to then have students sit down and journal about. I love anything that makes them think in terms of all of their senses when they come to writing, when they come to having a conversation or a discussion with one another. But a sensory walk like this can take, you can do it in a few minutes, you can take a longer period of time depending on your goals. But much like the 4 elements grounding exercise, the purpose of something like this is to help students start paying attention to what's going on inside their head, what they're feeling, what they're noticing around them, without getting into, what are you feeling right now? Having them think about it through their senses is an interesting path to just being aware of the relationship between our feelings and our bodies. Yes. But why is it important to take time to think about emotions here? But there's actually some really compelling research suggesting that having students be able to detect and label their emotions actually correlates to their success in other areas in your classroom. So it improves their social interactions. That seems probably kind of logical, but there's also research that shows that it also can have impacts on their academics. Spending time having students become aware of their emotions can contribute to a stronger classroom environment, but also just the general well-being of the students in your classroom. So it's something to think about as it integrates into what you're already teaching. It's also something to think about as kind of a standalone. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that I have seen teachers do to great effect is just having simple conversations with your students about what emotions look like, feel like, sound like. Just naming them, giving some voice to the fact that we have a variety of them. So for example, I'm going to share a couple of pictures right here, and this is an activity that you could do as an opening in class. It's something that you could do as a brain break, but putting a picture up and just having a conversation with your students about whatever emotion seems to be represented by the image that they see in front of them. And you'd be amazed by the kinds of things that students might come up with as they look at these pictures. It's also a great opportunity for students to start practicing building empathy. So if we look at this picture, you're also going to find that not everybody's answers are going to be the same, and that is fantastic for students to learn about how each other's thinks, what experiences they bring to the classroom environment. So think of questions like, what is this person feeling? How do you know? Why might they be feeling that way? What does it feel like in your body if you make your face like this? Particularly with younger kids, like giving them the experience of mirroring what they see. If this person were your friend, what might you say to them? I love that question, just to see what they might come up with. These are all images that I was able to find online, but even better if you can have your students take pictures with different emotions and then have a discussion as a class about what you see. It's really interesting to hear where students' perspectives come from, because one student might think that this is a face of someone who's sad, someone else might think that it's a face of someone who's trying to convince somebody that they want something. But being able to have those conversations also helps you get to know your students better. There's no shortage of, of photos of people with facial expressions that you can work with. This is actually an activity that we love to do with our students in our classrooms, that is actually having them create their own photos related to different emotions. So the emotion continuum is something that We use across different grade levels. You start with the class having them think about all the different kinds of emotions that they might feel, words to describe the ways that they feel. Depending on how old your students are, you might start with sort of a limited vocabulary with that and build on it. But then having the students themselves actually take a picture, you have them, you say, okay, show me what your face looks like when you're surprised, and you take a picture of it. And then the way that emotion continuum works is you take all those pictures and those words and you string them up in the classroom. And then when students come into class, they have little paper clips with their clothespins with their names on them, and they put their clothespin next to the emotion that they're feeling as they come into the classroom, and they can also move it to other emotions during the day if their feelings change. And this can be a really great thing for a teacher to be able to see how their class is feeling at any given point. Yeah, Carliana.
Yeah. Hi, how are you? Uh,
Hello.
I have a picture in my classroom, but I working with kids from the 1 year. But
Yeah.
sometimes the grown kids, the 3 year or 4 year, come from my room. And I say, oh, inside the picture, inside the, oh no, look, this is baby is crying, this baby is happy. Yes, and I say, okay, an example, Oakley, where is your grumpy face? Yes, yes, and yes, you know it's right. You the kids want to say the different picture in different position, told about this. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's actually making me think about I have a teacher who's in one of our programs right now who works most of her students are on the autism spectrum, and they're young. They're, I would say, between 3 and 5 years old. It's a mixed age classroom that she has. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting in her classroom, because she's working with her students on being able to identify emotions, she has a mirror next to pictures of different emotions so that the students can look at that emotion and then try to make that face in the mirror so they can see what their face looks like, making a face like the emotion that they see.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah, yeah. Sarah says, in my class, I've had them draw faces for different emotions or create collages with old magazines or books. Oh, that's fascinating. So they're kind of going on the hunt looking for different faces that will show different feelings and emotions. I love that. Thank you, Sarah. Um, yes. And then another thing, this is probably something that we get into more with students who are a little older. It'd be a little bit harder in early childhood, although they can definitely embody this. This is an activity that I really love called coloring our emotions. Um, and I love any activity in the classroom that uses paint chips because, I mean, they're basically free when you go to a hardware store. I don't know if that's true in Australia, but here in the United States, that is a thing that you can go to the hardware store and get these paint chips, paint sample sheets at the hardware store. And what I like to do with them with students, because they talk about the idea of gradations, right? Like there's a lighter color and it gets darker, 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 and the darkest color. And I like to use these as a tool for students to think about how our emotions also exist on a spectrum. So if I'm feeling angry, there's like really, really angry, and then there's just a little bit angry, and then there's gradations in between. So I use these for poetry writing, for all kinds of things, but to talk about the idea of any kind of experience that exists on, you know, from less to more intense. But when we think about emotions, having students do something where they think about when I'm happy, in the lightest color on the strip, writing down a sentence about something that's when they're feeling just a little bit happy, what does that look like? When they're feeling more happy, what does that look like? When they're feeling the most happy, what does that look like? Giving and the activity as you see it described here gives lots of other ways to things to do related to coloring our emotions. But I love when we're talking about emotions, also making the space for students to think about the idea that they change in intensity over time. A lot of the research about emotional self-awareness focuses on the importance of helping our children understand that our feelings don't stay the same way all the time. And I know that's something I have to remind myself repeatedly of as an adult. Sometimes when you're in the depths of whatever you're feeling, it can feel like I'm never going to feel different. But helping students really understand the story of how emotions change over time. That what feels really intense right now will change, will feel different tomorrow, will feel different the day after that. And so I think sometimes an activity like this one with the paint chips can also speak to that idea of things lessening or growing in intensity. Another thing for students to understand when they're becoming aware of their emotions is how do we help them build a toolkit of strategies or activities to think about what to do when they want to work through an emotion. One thing at Inspired Teaching, particularly when we do that emotion continuum that we spend a lot of time, particularly with teachers, talking about, is the idea that it's important for students to not think about their emotions in terms of good emotions and bad emotions, but just recognizing that they are what they are, and knowing that that still means that sometimes when we're feeling one particular way, we might want to be able to move through that to be able to feel a different way. So if I'm really angry and my anger is negatively affecting my experiences with myself and others, how do I move to a different kind of feeling? And these are the sorts of things that as adults we come up with different tools for. I mean, for me, I have learned that if I'm, particularly if I'm feeling an emotion that I don't really, I'm not wanting to have that at the time, or it's getting in the way of my functioning, going for a walk is my go-to all the time. But it took me a while to learn that about myself. Sometimes I thought stewing and sitting and being mad was the strategy. So how do we learn those things? We learn these different strategies through practice. And it turns out that there's a lot of research showing that movement is a great way to help students move through high emotional situations. And particularly for those of us, I actually think this happens pre-K all the way through high school, but especially in the elementary grades, I'm thinking about the countless times that I'm in a classroom where a student is having some kind of a meltdown, and really thinking about how do we help them to have tools for figuring out how to move through that emotional experience. So giving them opportunities to move, just in general, is important all the time in our classrooms, but also teaching them about ways to express their emotions or move through their emotions with their bodies can be helpful too. Is that something, what are some ways that you all have found, particularly when students are high emotion? Do any of you use movement as a way to help students get through that, like taking a walk around the room or going outside? What are some ways that you've dealt with high emotion situations in your classrooms? I know something that's become increasingly popular, and I've actually seen this a lot in the last couple of years since COVID. There's a big concern about students' mental health and well-being. And so in some classrooms, I've seen teachers creating calm corners, or we actually working with one whole school district where they got funding to be able to put those into everybody's classrooms. And those have things in them like squishy things for students to play with or hold on to, or puzzles or games or things to move to play with that has a piece of movement that's part of it. Nathan wrote in the chat, one of my kids last year enjoyed the release of throwing things. So we got him different weighted balls to help him. Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, those are the kinds of things I could also imagine in calm corners. Although I would imagine, I'm very curious about your context where they're able to throw things maybe in a classroom.
Yes, I had two options. One is you put the sunflower or any flower, the paper flower, and when you have salted, you say, okay, small the flower and blow off, and the flower is the trunk.
Oh,
And
yeah,
this is
yeah.
the key. Yeah, you say small, laugh and breathe and say something is the so I have in my car, but this is the paper, the construction paper,
Yeah.
and you make it. I had the chicken, the little chicken, and you had the mouth, and you say, okay, I say pio pio, breathe.
Huh.
Pio pio, breathe, and the kids
Oh.
hold down. It's very nice.
Oh, I love that. Yes, absolutely. And I've seen teachers do the like hold up a finger, like smelling a candle, smelling a flower and blowing out the candle. But what you have sounds like it might be like a pinwheel that
Yes,
actually they
exactly.
can see it. I love that. I love that. Yeah. And the bird, I want to see it. I would love to see a picture of that if you could send me one. That sounds really
Yes, of course, of course.
That'd be great. That'd be great. And Sarah said, I have stuffed animals in my class and kids can borrow them for the day to squeeze them. I love that. I think that yes, particularly having something physical that you can hold on to, that just that experience of being able to hug something or hold something can make a big difference. And also just teaching students about the idea of how emotions feel in our body, and talking about that I think can be key. So creating opportunities for students to practice that in the classroom, and notice that and talk about it in the classroom can be really effective. So one way I like to do that, is like if we're reading a story, are there places in the story where we can pause and say, can everybody show me what it would feel like in their bodies to feel like this character right now? And I'll give you an example right here with this delightful book, by Nikki Grimes, called Words with Wings. If you have not read this one, it's a beautiful, collection of poems that are about, a daydreamer in a classroom and what happens over her experience in the classroom as her classmates and her teacher, begin to recognize that her daydreaming is a gift and not a curse. But for example, if we just look at one of these poems right here, if you think about with your class, asking your class, saying, "Okay, we're going to read this poem out loud. While we read it, I want you to show me with your body what's happening, what it feels like. Show me with your whole body what it feels like, with each of these parts of this poem." So we'll read first day. I duck down in the seat of my new class. And you can imagine all the students can physically see what that feels like and think about what that feels like in their body. To these kids, I'm not Gabby yet. I'm just a shy girl who lives inside her head. And there's no right or wrong to this, but even asking your students, what would that look like to live inside your head? Or what does that mean to you? If you're shy, what does that look like in your body to be shy? No one even knocks on the door for a visit. And this poem is beautiful because it has so many vivid images in it, but just asking students, what does that mean? What might that feel like in your body if we say, no one knocks on the door for a visit with my mind or who I am? They don't know it's beautiful in here. And even that last line, they don't know it's beautiful in here, it's describing something inside her head, but asking the class, show with your face what it feels like to imagine being inside your head where something is beautiful. So this is a very simple and short poem, but there are so many pieces of writing out there that are like this. And having students really think about these words in their own bodies can be a way to not only help them understand the text better or differently, but also gives them some vocabulary and some practice with being able to have words or experiences to describe what they're feeling, in themselves. And here are a couple of other activities that Inspire Teaching has that are in this same in this same vein. So, doing many of you have probably come across visual thinking strategies before. This is kind of a variation on that. We call it seeing with different eyes, but it's using an image. I like to use pictures that have a lot of different things to look at in them, that can encourage all kinds of different perspectives. But this activity, you look at a picture and you have students share what they observe, what they notice about the picture. It's great for creating conversation with each other, but it also will always end up pulling up, questions and reflections that have to do with feelings, with emotions based on what they're observing and seeing in the image. And so this activity will have a series of, steps that are described to you about sort of how to walk your students through the experience. But it's really, what's neat about it is it's an opportunity for students to notice that if they're looking at the same image, they each might take something different from it. If you teach social studies, you can do this with images that relate to your content. That can be, really effective, particularly looking at photographs from a particular time period in history. But this one is where you look at an image that has more than one person in it, and you encourage students to try to imagine what is taking place in that image. And I'll share with you that just last Thursday, we did a workshop with, a bunch of teachers in DC. We actually were in an art museum. And what we had students do, or the teachers do for this activity, was they went and looked at two different pieces of artwork in the art museum. and then with their partner, they each looked at this artwork. They imagined what would happen if those two pieces of artwork, the people that were portrayed in them or the ideas that were portrayed in them, if they had a conversation. And then with their partner, they constructed a conversation together based on what they had seen in those images. And that's I'm thinking, Carliana, that would be very difficult for your children, but you can do things like that still with the way that that would look like in early childhood is conversations with puppets. So if you have puppets in your classroom, those are some of my favorite tools, especially for young children to be able to have conversations and think about emotions and feelings. I actually like using them with high school students too, because if we are having a conversation with puppets, sometimes we're able to say things or express things or process things that are harder to do when it's just me looking eye to eye with you, having a conversation with you. But having students imagine and empathize with another person is another way for them to learn a little bit about their own emotions. So this one can be particularly fun in that way. Then we're going to talk a little bit about just a couple of other tools that we love at Inspired Teaching that help students again just to kind of get inside their own minds and their own thinking. This is a really simple one. This was something that we were introduced to actually at the beginning of the pandemic, which I used it a lot with teachers actually to speak to the idea that you can't pour from an empty cup. So we have to take care of ourselves as educators to be able to take care of the children in our care. But that has to do with being aware of our emotional capacity as well as our physical capacity and how we're handling things. So I actually love using this with students too. It can be a diagnostic, it can be something that students can share with you, or they can just use it for themselves. But thinking about if we have three cups, one of safety, connectedness, and hope, or you can change what the criteria is on the bottom depending on the age range that you're working with, or the vocabulary you're using with your class to think about their feelings or their experience in community. And all you do is just sort of draw a little line on the cup to show how full or how empty you are there, and then use that as a reflection. I also like using these as kind of an exit ticket with a class. And if at the end of the day, when everybody leaves my classroom, I gather these up from them and find that we're really low on connectedness, that might change the way that I think about starting my class tomorrow. And I might make a choice that I'm going to do something where students are going to be engaging with one another and talking to one another and connecting with one another differently. So a very simple little tool, but I like it because it's visual and it makes sense, and it's the idea that I'm not going to have a lot to give to other people if I myself am feeling depleted, which hopefully none of you are. But I also know that it's teaching is an intense job. So being aware of our own fullness or emptiness in these cups can be important as an opportunity for us to say, okay, wait a minute, what do I need to do differently in my own life to be able to fill my cup up? And if I can't do it at work, are there things that I can do outside of work that can help me to feel more connected, or to help, or are there things that I need to talk to my administrator about if I don't feel safe? Um, so the same ways you might imagine that this could be good for your own reflection, teaching students how to use tools like this to think about their own needs can be effective. And that's why, for those of you who have attended these workshops before, this is going to be familiar to you. But this is a tool that we use all the time called the ABCDE of learner needs. And this is another way of thinking about how do we make sure that our students have what they need to be able to learn. When a student is, we say that all behavior is communication. And so if a student's having a difficult time in class or demonstrating some kind of unwanted behavior, we use this tool as a reflection resource to think about, rather than this student's misbehaving in an effort to disrupt my class, asking ourselves the question, the student's misbehaving, what need might they have that's not being met? So do they have a need for autonomy, being able to have some say in what happens to them? Are they struggling with belonging? Do they not feel connected to their peers or to me? Has their competence been threatened? Have they not had an opportunity to show or feel successful with what they're learning? And are there some modifications or adjustments I can do to give them that experience? Is this what I'm asking them to do developmentally appropriate? Are they having a hard time or having a meltdown or not engaging with the content because it's too hard or it's too easy? Are they bored, or are they really struggling? And again, what kinds of modifications might I need to make to support them? Are they engaged? Is it something that's drawing all of their attention, that's making them excited to learn? And is it fun? Have we done things that are fun? And fun doesn't mean that everything, even though there's a firework right here, that everything needs to be fireworks. But are there ways maybe that I can infuse more joy or play in what we're doing in the class to make sure that that need is met? So this is a tool we usually think about from a teacher perspective as a way to understand what's happening, particularly with unwanted behavior in the classroom. But we also have a resource, again, we'll share with you, where students can use this, again, as a way to build emotional self-awareness. This has to do with their learning needs, but those are connected to their emotions. Can they reflect on if they are struggling in class, or if they're looking at class overall? Can they identify what need they have that's not being met? And if they can, then they have a tool for being able to talk to you or to advocate for themselves. Again, this language isn't going to be something that's going to work for every age level. But if you have students that are probably, I'd say, maybe starting in third or fourth grade, and then certainly all the way through high school, this can be a tool for them to be able to look at how look to look at how things are working for them in the classroom, and then have some language for saying, this isn't working well for me, or I need to have more opportunities to feel like I belong in the classroom. And that builds their toolkit of being able to do what they need, or to advocate for what they need to make themselves feel better. So we'll share, we have many, many resources related to the ABCDEs. We have a whole guidebook and a whole section of our website on it. So this is a very fast overview, but it is something that we found really, it's very helpful. I find it super helpful in my interactions, um, in my job, but also, frankly, I find it really helpful in my interactions. I have a 16-year-old at home, and I've been using this tool from the day that he was born. That's one of the great benefits of working at Inspired Teaching, is that I get to use these tools in my home as well as in my work. And what I find this really helpful for, and I know that teachers that I've worked with do too, is that I think of it as like a useful pause when I am having when things are not going well, and there's an unwanted behavior, or with my child, if I'm having a conflict with him, I go through this list in my head and I think, what might be missing? What need do we have that hasn't been met? And I gave the example this summer. I was having a problem with getting dirty dishes consistently left in the sink. And I was like, why does this keep happening? Even though we've had all these conversations about it. And I figured out that part of it had to do with, it really ended up being that it was an issue with belonging. And I realized that the pile up of dishes in the sink had a lot to do with the fact that we were sort of ships passing in the night and weren't really having a lot of opportunities to actually sit down and talk. And when we did, all I was doing was saying, why don't you clean up the dishes in the sink? Instead of actually being able to sit down and be like, hey, how are you doing? Let's have a conversation about our lives before I jump into the things that I need. And before we even get into that conversation, let's talk about what we need from each other in order to be able to share this space with each other and be respectful in this space. So I can't recommend the ABCDs highly enough. They're useful for all sorts of facets of our lives. All right. So moving on, we've got a variety of different tools I've shared, but I think that the last thing that is actually kind of what we started with, which is just how do we create space in our classrooms, for students to be able to to take a breath and to focus and to think about what's going on in their heads. And I just wanted to share with you all this short, kind of beautiful video. But as you're watching it, I want you to think about whatever grade level you're working with. How might you use this video as a tool? And are there things that you see in here that make you think about what you might already be doing with your students? So it's only a couple minutes long, but it's kind of beautiful. So I wanted to introduce you to it tonight.
I get really mad when my brother hits me a lot. I don't like it when you say you don't want to play with me. When I'm mad, my brain can get a headache and it can start hurting. Your blood keeps pumping because you're like really mad. And you start to get sweaty because you're getting really, really mad. And then when you start getting really mad, you turn red. When your body can't really control yourself, mad just takes over your body. I just get out of control. It's kind of like if you had a jar and then the jar would be your brain and then you put glitter in the jar and that would be how you would feel. If you shook up the jar and the glitter went everywhere, that would be how your mind looks. And it's like spinning around and then you don't have any time to think. And you sometimes punch stuff and people when you don't really mean it. When I get angry, I feel it in my heart. I really don't like when I get angry. The amygdala really reacts, but the prefrontal cortex tries to keep it down. When I feel like I want to, get really angry and yell, I just sometimes, take deep breaths. First you find a place where you can be alone, then you find some way to relax and calm down. When I need to calm down, I take deep breaths. I breathe in through my nose. Sometimes I close my eyes or just take deep breaths. It's coming down, it's not moving. It's slowing down and then it stops. And the heart pumps slow and then it goes into your brain. It's like all the sparkles are at the bottom of your brain. My brain slows down and then I feel more calm and then I'm ready to speak to that person.
Do that, the image that you saw in there with the glitter falling down in it, it's an activity that I've seen in a couple of kindergarten classrooms where they have students make those just with they find plastic jars and there's some ingredients for it. I'll look it up and see if I can share with you the concoction for how you put it together, because I don't think it's just water and glitter, because that would make I think the glitter would float. But there's basically students create these themselves, and the idea is that can also be a tool for helping them to calm down. They have them on their desk or they keep them somewhere in the classroom and they shake them up and then sit and watch everything kind of settle. And I've seen those be very effective, and you could do those with any age level. I still strongly encourage things that seem like arts and crafts with high school students because they want it as much as anybody. I just did a gathering of high school students. We do a program called Speak Truth, where students come together and talk about issues that are important in their lives. And the topic that they chose that they wanted to talk about was mental health and how to talk to people if you're not feeling okay. So we had a whole discussion with questions that students had crafted on that topic. But for that discussion, I brought in a bunch of coloring book pages and markers and actually like beads for making bracelets and dot to dot pages and things like that, and just put them all in the center of the room for the students. And at first there were some students who came into the room and were like, what is this? But by the end, they were fully engaged in the conversation, but they were all drawing or making bracelets or doing things with the dot to dots. These were students of all different genders. They were freshmen through high school, through seniors. Not only calmed the group down, but also brought them together. So again, another reason for why I think taking the time for students to be able to sort of be calm and be in a space where they can talk about how they're feeling is important at any time. But I'm noticing that it's something that they need a lot right now. Any other thoughts looking at that
The
video?
folder here, look.
Look at that! Oh, beautiful! Oh, that's amazing!
Yes, it's very easy.
That's so
You
neat.
have two folders, and have the construction paper red, and you put it all chicken or whatever you pet you have.
Wow, so students could create that themselves.
Yes, exactly. This is you use it for the project. Say, okay, it's a project for today, and you're going to start when you have stress, go use it. It's
Yeah.
very nice.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I like how in that video, they seem like mostly elementary age students, but I feel like there's a range of ages there, and it inspires having a conversation with students about different emotions. Like, what does it feel like in your body? I love how specific the children get at talking about how their heart feels when it's pounding, or what happens to their head, or showing what happens with their body, and creating the space for being able to express that. With high school students, the conversation looks a little bit different, but a lot of the conversations I'm having right now with high schoolers have to do with how their phones and their experiences with social media and things like that are affecting their emotions, their thought patterns. One thing that they're really noticing is how it's affecting their sleep. And I find that just creating the space to say, okay, well, when you feel like you've been on your phone for too long, how does that feel? How does that feel in your body? How do you know what gives you an indicator that you've been there for too long? And they can describe it. And everybody's experience is a little bit different, but when in a room they're able to have a conversation about that, they find commonality and connection with one another. And in a lot of instances, particularly their emotions or their moods or things that concern them about how they're feeling, when they have the chance to talk with one another, they also end up sharing resources and ideas about things that work for them. And that's been kind of beautiful because they come from all kinds of different experiences. Some might have had therapy before, some might have found stuff that they found online. And creating a space where, as the adult in the room, you can actually hear that conversation and offer additional insights and perspectives to them, I think can be super important. Because at a certain point, if it doesn't feel strange to talk about emotions or make different faces or show what it feels like in our body in elementary school, as students get older and older, there's even less of a chance that that's something that they have exposure to. And then I think that creates a scenario where you can be an 18-year-old and not really have a lot in your toolkit to help you figure out what to do with your emotions and how you're feeling. And that can be really scary when you go out into the world, and it's not as if your emotions go away the older you get. They can be just as intense, but it can be even more ungrounding when you don't have the sort of safety of the community of a classroom of your peers or a teacher or lots of other adults around you to help you process them. And at Inspired Teaching, the way this ties into all of the work that we do with teachers is that being in touch with and aware of our emotions is really key to knowing each other. And as teachers, and knowing ourselves. And as teachers, if we don't know who our students are and we don't have spaces in our classrooms for them to keep exploring that, it's going to diminish our capacity to be able to reach them and for us all to be able to learn together.